The Red Shoes was originally written by Hans Christian Andersen. The version I'm going to read today is by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. The Red Shoes. Once there was a poor motherless child who had no shoes. But the child saved cloth scraps wherever she found them, and over time sewed herself a pair of red shoes. They were crude, but she loved them. They made her feel rich, even though her days were spent gathering food in the thorny woods until far past dark. But one day, as she trudged down the road in her rags and her red shoes, a gilded carriage pulled up beside her. Inside was an old woman who told her she was going to take her home and treat her as her own little daughter. So to the wealthy woman's house they went, and the child's hair was cleaned and combed. She was given pure white undergarments and a fine wool dress and white stockings and shiny black shoes. When the child asked after her old clothes, and especially her red shoes, the old woman said the clothes were so filthy and the shoes so ridiculous that she had thrown them into the fire, where they were burnt to ashes. The child was very sad, for even with all the riches surrounding her, the humble red shoes made by her own hands had given her the greatest happiness. Now she was made to sit still all the time, to walk without skipping, and to not speak unless spoken to. But a secret fire began to burn in her heart, and she continued to yearn for her old red shoes more than anything. As the child was old enough to be confirmed on the day of the Innocents, the old woman took her to an old crippled shoemaker to have a special pair of shoes made for the occasion. In the shoemaker's case there stood a pair of red shoes that were made of finest leather, that were finer than fine. They practically glowed. So even though red shoes were scandalous for church, the child, who chose only with her hungry heart, picked the red shoes. The old lady's eyesight was so poor she could not see the colour of the shoes, and so paid for them. The old shoemaker winked at the child and wrapped the shoes up. The next day the church members were agog over the shoes on the child's feet. The red shoes shone like burnished apples, like hearts, like red-washed plums. Everyone stared, even the icons on the wall. Even the statues stared disapprovingly at her shoes. But she loved the shoes all the more. So when the pontiff intoned, the choir hummed, the organ pumped, the child thought nothing more beautiful than her red shoes. By the end of the day the old woman had been informed about her ward's red shoes. "Never, never wear those red shoes again," the old woman threatened. But the next Sunday the child couldn't help but choose the red shoes over the black ones, and she and the old woman walked to church as usual. At the door to the church was an old soldier with his arm in a sling. He wore a little jacket and had a red beard. He bowed and asked permission to brush the dust from the child's shoes. The child put out her foot, and he tapped the soles of her shoes with a little wigga-jig-jig song that made the soles of her feet itch. "Remember to stay for the dance," he smiled and winked at her. Again, everyone looked askant at the girl's red shoes, but she so loved the shoes that were bright like crimson, bright like raspberries, bright like pomegranates, that she could hardly think of anything else, hardly hear the service at all. So busy was she turning her feet this way and that, admiring her red shoes, that she forgot to sing. As she and the old woman left the church, the injured soldier called out, "What beautiful dancing shoes!" His words made the girl take a few little twirls right there and then. But once her feet had begun to move, they would not stop, and she danced through the flower beds and around the corner of the church until it seemed as though she had lost complete control of herself. She did a gavotte and then a cassardis and then waltzed by herself through the fields across the way. The old woman's coachman jumped up from his bench and ran after the girl, picked her up and carried her back to the carriage, but the girl's feet in the red shoes were still dancing in the air as though they were still on the ground. The old woman and the coachman tugged and pulled, trying to pry the red shoes off. It was such a sight, all hats askew and kicking legs, but at last the child's feet were calmed. Back home the old woman slammed the red shoes down high on a shelf and warned the girl never to touch them again. But the girl could not help looking up at them and longing for them. To her they were still the most beauteous things on the face of the earth. Not long after, as fate would have it, the old woman became bedridden, and as soon as her doctors left, the girl crept into her room where the red shoes were kept. She glanced up at them so high on the shelf. Her glance became a gaze, and her gaze became a powerful desire, so much so that the girl took the shoes from the shelf and fastened them on, feeling it would do no harm. But as soon as they touched her heels and toes, she was overcome by the urge to dance, and so out the door she danced, and then down the steps, first in a gavotte, then a casadist, and then in big, daring waltz turns in rapid succession. The girl was in her glory and did not realize she was in trouble until she wanted to dance to the left, and the shoes insisted on dancing to the right. And when she wanted to dance round, the shoes insisted on dancing straight ahead. And as the shoes danced the girl, rather than the other way round, they danced her right down the road, through the muddy fields, and out into the dark and gloomy forest. There against a tree was the old soldier with the red beard, his arm in a sling, and dressed in his little jacket. "Oh my," he said, "what beautiful dancing shoes!" Terrified, she tried to pull the shoes off, but as much as she tugged, the shoes stayed fast. She hopped on one foot and then the other, trying to take off the shoes, but on her one foot on the ground kept dancing even so, and her other foot in her hand did its part of the dance also. And so dance and dance and dance she did, over highest hills and through the valleys, in the rain and in the snow and in the sunlight she danced. She danced in the darkest night and through sunrise, and she was still dancing in twilight as well. But it was not good dancing. It was terrible dancing, and there was no rest for her. She danced into a churchyard, and there a spirit of dread would not allow her to enter. The spirit pronounced these words over her: "You shall dance in your red shoes until you become like a wraith, like a ghost, till your skin hangs from your bones, till there is nothing left of you but entrails dancing. You shall dance door to door through all the villages, and you shall strike each door 3 times, and when people peer out they will see you and fear your fate for themselves. Dance, red shoes, you shall dance." The girl begged for mercy, but before she could plead further, her red shoes carried her away. Over the briars she danced, through the streams, over the hedgerows, and on, dancing, still dancing, till she came to her old home, and there were mourners. The old woman who had taken her in had died. Yet even so she danced on by, and dance she did, as dance she must. In abject exhaustion and horror, she danced into a forest where lived the town's executioner, and the axe on his wall began to tremble as soon as it sensed her coming near. "Please," she begged the executioner as she danced by his door, "please cut off my shoes to free me from this horrid fate." And the executioner cut through the straps of the red shoes with his axe, but still the shoes stayed on her feet. And so she cried to him that her life was worth nothing, and that he should cut off her feet. So he cut off her feet. And the red shoes with the feet in them kept on dancing through the forest and over the hill and out of sight. And now the girl was a poor cripple, and had to find her own way in the world, as a servant to others, and she never, ever again wished for red shoes. You can read the full interpretation by Clarissa Pinkola Estes in The Women Who Run with the Wolves. But I'm just going to read a little bit of the introduction to the explanation to you. The psychological truth in the red shoes is that a woman's meaningful life can be pried, threatened, robbed, or seduced away from her unless she holds onto or retrieves her basic joy and wild worth. The tale calls our attention to traps and poisons we too easily take unto ourselves when we are caught in a famine of wild soul. Without a firm participation with the wild nature, a woman starves and falls into an obsession of feel-betters, leave-me-alones, and love me, please. When she is starved, a woman will take any substitutes offered, including those that, like dead placebos, do absolutely nothing for her, as well as destructive and life-threatening ones that hideously waste her time and talents or expose her life to physical danger. It is a famine of the soul that makes a woman choose things that will cause her to dance madly out of control, then too near the executioner's door. So in order to understand this tale further, we have to see how a woman can so drastically lose her way by losing her instinctual and wild life. The way to hold on to what we have, the way to find our way back to the wild feminine, is to see what mistakes a woman so trapped can make. Then we can backtrack and repair. Then we can have reunion. As we shall see, the loss of the handmade red shoes represents the loss of a woman's self-designed life and passionate vitality, and the taking on of a too tame life. This eventually leads to the loss of accurate perception, which leads to excess, which leads to loss of the feet, the platform on which we stand, our basis, a deep part of our instinctual nature that supports our freedom. In my words, the gilded carriage is everything that lures us from our soul-fulfilling path of joy, with false promises of an easier life. The kindly grandmother is everyone that is drawn to your light, only to extinguish it through control and domination of who you are allowed to be. The poor orphan girl is not allowed to be her wild, free self. Her treasured handmade shoes are burnt because they are dirty and handmade with love. They are replaced by the red shoes which have been bewitched. They seemed so beautiful to the little orphan girl, starved of love. She couldn't see the danger, was tricked into believing her life had improved, when in fact her life had been stifled. She had been imprisoned. The dancing symbolises addiction. We can't help ourselves. No one can help her. In desperation, she begs the executioner to chop off her feet, and so ends her days as a poor cripple. A warning to us all. Do not be fooled by that gilded carriage, however it manifests, as a benefactor who wants to take over your life, as the married man keeping his mistress in luxury, as easy money for turning a blind eye or telling a little white lie. Far better to live a sovereign, independent life of your own making and choosing than to be a slave to addiction because your soul is starved, because you are not living your own true life. You are living the life society expects of you, including your family, out of obligation, guilt, shame, fear. You are not doing what makes your heart sing. Step away from the false promise of a life of ease and luxury. There is no truth or nature in any of it. Stop being a slave to an ideal you can never reach. Use your hands to grow things and build things and recreate beauty. Use your brain to learn new things. Use your heart to connect with all life. It is all a part of you. Tell that kindly grandmother, no thanks, you are happy to walk. Most especially, never ever give up the right to choose your own choices. Everything we actually need is given to us, no strings attached, by Mother Nature. No machine could ever do it better.